the Pod Network Entertainment.
This episode may cover sensitive topics like sexual assault, domestic violence, stalking, depression, and suicide, which could be triggering. While we recognize the challenges this content may pose, we advise you to prioritize your safety and well-being.
Shocking, sad, revealing, and deeply researched, PH Murder Stories podcast covers the true account of infamous killings and true crime stories from the Philippines.
There's no such thing as questions, just hidden answers. Stay tuned as we revisit the inconceivable crimes that exist.
Some listeners may find the following content of PH Murder Stories highly disturbing due to its graphic nature. PH Murder Stories does not condone nor promote violence of all sorts.
Viewer discretion is advised.
There have been infamous crimes in the Philippines that have happened during the holiday season. A particular case that comes to mind is the heartless killing of mother and son Sonya and Frank Gregorio from Tarlac. Former policeman Jonel Nuezca had a verbal altercation with the Gregorios after the former policeman was arresting Frank for illegal possession of Boga, an improvised noisemaker cannon. Sonya, his mother, came to her son's aid and the altercation with Nuezca promptly escalated. Nuezca ended up shooting both victims, and it became one of the most infamous crimes in 2020.
3 holiday seasons later, we noticed 2 separate peculiar cases that happened during the week of Christmas 2023 and New Year 2024. What's bizarre about these cases was the gruesome nature that the 2 victims had gone through on separate occasions, where the culprits behind their killings beheaded the victims. Given that these gruesome cases are similar, we decided to cover both crimes in one episode, a first of its kind in our show.
You are listening to the PH Murder Stories podcast, and this is the 5th episode of Season 4.
May ginamit na pampatulog o ano yung pwedeng gamitin sa kanya kasi hindi naman pwedeng pinutol ng ulo na hindi nagpumiglas. So kung makikita natin sa crime scene, hindi po kumalat yung dugo. Galit nung pumatay is talagang sobra, sir. Kasi the way na pagpatay niya is pagpugod. Masyadong parang galit na galit yung tao.
The first victim that will be covered in this episode is 50-year-old Alfredo 𝗘𝗣𝗜. He worked as a security guard at the 𝘗𝙗𝙗𝙗𝙗 branch. On December 24, 𝗘𝗑𝗏 was scheduled to take a night shift, as recalled by his wife, Dolores 𝗘𝗑𝗏. They talked at past 5 p.m. At first, Dolores didn't worry too much about communicating with her husband. She had a lot of things on her agenda as she was getting ready for her family to celebrate Christmas Eve. However, as time passed by, she began to realize that her husband wasn't responding to her texts and calls. This worried Dolores and prompted her to visit her husband's workplace the following day. After arriving at 𝘗𝙗𝙗𝙗𝙗 on December 25, Dolores shockingly learned about the gruesome nature that her husband Alfredo had to endure.
Tahimik nilang sityo na eskandalo. Meron sa kanilang nakitang pugot na ulo ng tao.
Dating ko doon sa barangay, nabigla lang ako nandoon na yung isang ulo. Ang ginawa ko, tinakpan ko na lang para hindi na sila makapicture. Ang iba nga, suka-suka sila tungod sa nakita nila.
Heading to the province of 𝘬𝙧𝙪𝙚𝙗, 65-year-old Rosa Asilo, a convenience store owner in Purok 1, Barangay Canayugan, Bayugan City, had a heated altercation with Mario Fortun, whom she accused of being a thief. Fortun did not handle Asilo's allegations very well. On the afternoon of January 2, 2023, Fortun decided to drink alcohol with his friends to vent his frustrations, but might have gotten a little too drunk, luring him to commit the biggest mistake of his life that eventually became one of the most gruesome crimes that happened in 𝘬𝙧𝙪𝙚𝙗.
Back in Manila, Alfredo 𝗘𝗣𝗜𝗚𝗏's wife, Dolores, was worrying about her husband's whereabouts and for not responding to her texts and calls. It is why she decided to go to her husband's workplace on the morning of December 25, 2023. Sadly, as soon as Dolores arrived in 𝘬𝙑𝙗𝙗𝙗, she learned that her husband, Alfredo, was murdered. Based on the initial investigation, the victim was beheaded and the suspects took his head with them. Dolores told reporters, quote, "Mga pasado 5:00, nagche-check siya kung ano ginagawa namin sa bahay. Sakto po, medyo busy ako kaya di kami gaano nakapag-usap. Sa isip ko, gabi ko na lang siya ulit tatawagan bago ako makatulog." Unquote. Unfortunately, when Dolores called her husband at 10 p.m. on Christmas Eve, he wasn't answering. She didn't expect that she would become a widow on Christmas, as well as knowing anyone who would want to harm her husband.
As for the murder of 65-year-old Rosa Asilo, this case was promptly solved by the authorities. Mario Fortun, alleged by Asilo as a thief in their community, decided to have a drink with his friends to vent his frustration after feeling humiliated. Way before the final altercation between Asilo and Fortun on January 2, 2023, other people in their community told reporters that both were already at odds, claiming that both had an encounter before where Asilo threatened Fortun, pointing a large knife towards Fortun while the latter was holding a piece of bamboo or kawayan aiming to hit Asilo. On the day of the gruesome crime, Fortun, who was already intoxicated from drinking, informed his friends that he would go outside and get them a gift, and all of them expected that Fortun would buy more alcohol. As soon as he went back to his friends, they were shocked to see Rosa Asilo's head being paraded around by the suspect.
Days passed since the holiday season, and the authorities were able to distinguish the motive behind the gruesome slaying of Alfredo 𝗘𝗑𝗏𝗜𝗏.
Ayon sa 𝘬𝑐PD-CIDU, hindi pa rin natutunton ang ulo ng biktima.
Walang nabasag, purely nakapasok ang suspect na walang sirang gamit dun sa pasukan, sa entrance. Pag walang forced entry, malamang meron pong inside job na tinatawag.
Or pwede rin nakakilala niya.
Pwede rin pong ganun.
Patuloy na inaalam ang motibo sa krimen at may ilang persons of interest nang tinitingnan ang mga otoridad.
According to reports uncovered by the police last December 23, 2023, an agent from 𝘬𝙑𝙗𝙗𝗏 sold 2 cars and left the money from the sale in an office vault in the car dealer's premises, which was also reported stolen on the day 𝗘𝗑𝗏𝗏𝗏 was gruesomely murdered. Unfortunately, there was no security camera footage of the crime, as well as no signs of forced entry. Therefore, the authorities believe that this was an inside job, and 𝗘𝗑𝗏𝗏 may have known his assailants and was probably asked to join the robbery, but instead prevented the crime from happening, which led to his shocking demise. In addition, an unnamed witness came forward and told the police that he saw 4 suspects carrying off the office vault. 2 of the 4 were identified as Jomar Ragos and Michael Caballero, both of which were 𝗘𝗑𝗏𝗏𝗏's colleagues and fellow security guards at 𝘬𝙑𝙗𝙗𝗏𝗏, while the other 2 suspects are still unidentified. According to the authorities, one of the suspects even went to the police station for preliminary questioning, but was let go because there wasn't any evidence yet that pins the suspect for the crime. Thus, due process was strictly observed. However, the suspect was invited for further questioning and to undergo a lie detector test, but this time he didn't show. It was when the authorities learned that the suspect, together with his cohorts, vanished.
In the Rosa Asilo case, her killer, Mario Fortun, was promptly arrested by the authorities. Fortun confessed to the crime and told the police what he did to the elderly woman he mercilessly beheaded. According to Fortun, after leaving his friends, he went straight to Rosa Asilo's store and had another verbal altercation. Unfortunately, Fortun saw the long knife, probably the one Rosa pointed towards him in a previous fight, Fortune took the knife, stabbed Asilo to death, and ended up beheading her. As of now, Fortune is currently detained and will face a murder charge for the gruesome killing of Rosa Asilo.
Unfortunately, for the gruesome murder of Alfredo 𝗘𝗣𝗜𝗚𝗏, authorities have yet to arrest his killers and are still looking for them as of recording this episode. Concerning the gruesome nature of this crime, this is what the victim's son, 𝗍𝙗𝗏 said to news reporters in an interview dated January 22, 2024.
Hanggang sa ngayon, sir, hindi po makapaniwala na wala na po yung tatay ko. Na yung nanay ko po, umaasa rin po na minsan sabi niya may babalik pa ba, may ano pa ba, may uuwi pa ba. Pero unti-unti na rin po namin natatanggap na yun nga po, nawala na po si Papa. Pero yung sakit po na ginawa sa kanya ng mga taong yun, hindi ko po matatanggap kahit kailan po.
Ano yung masakit kanyo sa pagkamatay na gano'n?
Bali, hindi lang po siya basta pinatay. Kumbaga, hindi ko po parang ganun po, winalanghiya po eh. Magkakarumal-dumal po talaga yung ginawa eh. Na hindi po maiisip na gawin ng normal na tao. Yun po, parang hindi po makatao.
Hindi po nasabi na parang winalanghiya?
Kasi po, hanggang ngayon po, hindi po makita yung ulo ng tatay ko po eh. So, palaisipan pa rin po sa amin kung nasaan na po yun, kung saan po nila dinala, kung bakit po nila dinala.
Besides the whereabouts of his killers, Alfredo 𝗘𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏's head is still missing, which makes us wonder why his killers even beheaded him in the first place. Based on the opinion of some social media influencers who also discussed this case, they argue that 𝗘𝗏𝗏𝗏's killers probably had to resort to gruesome acts, such as beheading their victim to hide their primary objective, which was to rob the 𝘬𝙑𝗏𝗏𝗏 branch. Regardless, we hope our policemen can find the heartless people behind this gruesome murder and bring Alfredo 𝗘𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏's death to justice. If you're listening on Spotify, please let us know in the polls what you think, why, and what did the perpetrators do with the head of the victim.
As for the gruesome murder of Rosa Asilo, her killer, Mario Fortune, told reporters that he regrets what he did and he was just angry with the allegations being thrown at him by the victim and that his being intoxicated with alcohol had led him to commit the gruesome crime. Regardless, Rosa Asilo's relatives informed the media that they wanted her killer to face the fullest extent of the law.
Indeed, both these crimes are truly gruesome. However, these aren't the only major crimes that have happened in the past few years, and there are plenty of more murders that have transpired that our show will cover soon. If you reach this point, we would like to thank you for supporting our show. And if you're feeling generous, our GCash number or QR code is pinned to our social media accounts. Your support will help the PH Murder Stories podcast. Thank you for listening to PH Murder Stories.
If you like this episode, give us a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
You can also support our show on Patreon. Any amount you donate would benefit our team to keep doing what we love, which is to provide more true crime episodes for our listeners. Link in the description.
For further updates from our show, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at PH Murder Stories. And subscribe to our YouTube channel at PH Murder Stories.
The opinions of podcast creators, hosts, and guests are not necessarily reflective of the official stance of the Pod Network Entertainment, its hosts, or other network programs. The content created by the people behind the podcast is personal and not meant to harm any religion, ethnicity, group, organization, company, or individual.